This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
I think it's weird that Thanksgiving ends up being like a two-part thing. That normally stuff like that doesn't happen for me. And I think if we had stuck to the Thanksgiving massacre, it would have been a pretty short episode because of like you can go on Snopes and read about that one.
I think it's great to have a two-part because it's Thanksgiving and people have time to listen to it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was just kind of imagining like being able to sit around and have an extra beer while the football game's going on, and you can just put AirPods in and listen to True Crime XS while people are staring at the TV. That's what used to happen. You picked several cases, and obviously we covered two of them, and we still have two more. This first one, it fascinates me for a couple of different reasons, but this one moves us. So we covered California, and then we went down to Florida. But this one takes place November 22nd of 2012, and it takes place going back up north and sort of to the middle of the country in Little Falls, Minnesota. Before we get into this, why did you pick this one?
Because it's on Thanksgiving.
That's the only reason?
That's the only reason I picked any of these cases.
So
they're completely random other than that.
It's funny that you brought this one up because shortly after this happened, and I don't know if you remember this time in my world or not, but we talked about some of the stuff I was doing back then. About a year after this happened, I was very heavy into the felony murder doctrine. I had wanted to produce a documentary about a lot of the big cases related to felony murder. And I had used this case as the antithesis of the felony murder doctrine and the way it had been applied in a few cases. Because so there's a couple of parts of this. There's the case proper and what happens, the incident itself, the investigation. But then there's this massive legal debate that comes up after the fact. So I'll get into that as we talk. And I guess these are just known as the Byron David Smith killings, right?
I guess. So I'm sure that I heard about this case. It would have been something in passing. It seems like there's always some like terrible crimes in the news around Thanksgiving that I skip over because I really don't want it to cramp my holiday season. Not to mention like there was no mystery to this really. It was pretty straightforward. Byron David Smith killings, they occurred on Thanksgiving Day, 2012. And it involved an 18-year-old named Haley Kiefer and her cousin, 17-year-old Nicholas Brady. The two of them actually broke into the home of Byron David Smith, who is 64, in Little Falls, Minnesota. And at the time, Smith was home and he shot the two teenagers just minutes apart from each other as they entered the basement where he was sitting, and basically he said he was reading, but as the case unfolds, apparently he was sitting there waiting for them. And so it's a classic. There's no question these kids broke into this guy's house. He has video surveillance of it. And then later an audio recording comes out. So without question, these two kids, they broke and entered into his home under the guise that he wasn't there and they were supposedly going to rob the place.
Yeah, so they break it down a little bit further as far as the incident goes. Byron Smith, on Thanksgiving, he drives his vehicle down the road and he parks it in front of a neighbor's house. He's home, but his car is not there, so it kind of looks like his house is empty. And later that day is when what you described above happens. These two teenagers break into his house, and it is on video surveillance. There is some audio.
I just want to preface this with a couple of things. For one thing, so after I read this case and I was like, I vaguely remember that, and I didn't care because I didn't want it to ruin my holiday season. So this morning I watched the Dateline episode of it. Okay. And so that sort of morphed into, so on the Dateline episode, they played parts of the audio of the incident. But they cut out things, and like on the Dateline episode, they say like, we are cutting, certain parts out. And I was like, well, that's not acceptable. And I have to go find the audio, right? Because I want to hear it. And it boils down to about 12 minutes. But I think the thing that I ended up being able to pull up to listen to was maybe 30 minutes long. And it jumped to after it was finished, it jumped to his full 3-part interrogation with police. I listened to 2 hours worth of interrogations that he had with I can't think of the county's name right here at the moment, but hold on.
Is it the Little Falls Police, or is it?
No, it begins with
it's
an
Morrison
M.
County.
Morrison County detectives.
Yeah.
And so there's quite a bit about this case that's really fascinating to me after I watched the Dateline's fine. It's just a typical, Dateline. But what was really intriguing was listening to the audio of the incident, and then because I was doing something and I didn't stop it going into the interrogation, and me hearing firsthand from this guy's mouth talking with I think it's just one investigator talking with him. I don't know if there's other people there, but keep in mind this is the day after Thanksgiving. And so have that happen consecutively like that was very eye-opening about this case.
Do you think this is a situation where people would benefit from hearing parts of the interrogation as we go?
I don't know. I do know that what is widely reported, it's shocking to me what the story is, what the accepted story is, what went to trial, what he was convicted on, and then what the brass tacks of the story is.
When I look at this story, okay, there's a lot of court papers that are generated from this whole situation. So I'm curious, what in here is wrong versus a lot of that comes from the court documents. So are you saying they got some of it wrong? I'm a little confused.
All I can tell you is based on the interview or interrogation, he was in custody with the investigator. He had no idea who he had killed. He didn't know who Haley Kiefer, or he didn't recognize Nicholas Brady. I don't know where that account came from, but even in the interaction with law enforcement, he didn't know who he had killed. In fact, he thought it was somebody else.
So he thought that he was killing. So he was lying in wait, sort of.
Well, it never comes up in the Dateline, okay? They never address this, ever. Okay, this man, Byron David Smith, he had either lost or was in the process of losing his mind. And
we should probably say that this guy is he's a retired U.S. State Department employee who was described as being a security engineering officer. He had never been married, and he lived alone. He claimed at trial that prior to the murders, he had been burgled about half a dozen times over the preceding months, but only reported one previous burglary to the police. The police found evidence of 2 previous burglaries, one of which had occurred in his detached garage. And when they found evidence of it, appeared that Byron didn't know that it had happened. But among the items that were stolen were his father's POW watch, coins from a collection, and a chainsaw. Smith began routinely wearing a holster with a loaded gun inside his house and stashing bottles of water and granola bars in his basement, and then he installed a security system to protect himself.
This is Sergeant Investigator Jeremy Liberts with the Morris County Sheriff's Office, and the date is 11/23/2012. The time right now is 14:59 hours. I'm currently in the interview room at the Morrison County Sheriff's Office, and currently present with me is Byron
David Smith.
Okay, hold on one second, Byron.
Okay.
Byron, can you tell me your full name, please?
Byron David Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And I live at 143.
Hold on, Byron. What is your date of birth?
11 June 48.
So, say it again, I'm sorry. You said 11 June 48.
Yeah.
So, June 11th, 1948? Or?
I use the military terminology. Yeah. June 11th, 48.
Okay. All right. So, June 11th, 1948. That's your date of birth, correct? Okay. And, yeah, Byron, what is your home address?
14319 Elm Street, formerly 709 Riverwood.
Okay. But you live at 14319 Elm Street,
Yeah.
Off of, in the Riverwood area, correct? In Little Falls?
Elm Street.
Elm Street, Little Falls, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the zip code there?
56345.
Okay. And Byron, before I ask you any questions, you had currently been placed under arrest, Byron, today while out at your residence. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And before I ask you any questions in regards to the reason that led up to why you were placed under arrest was explained to you at the scene. Is that correct?
Because there were bodies, and that's a good reason.
Okay, yes, and that was explained to you. That's why you were placed under arrest at that time, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Byron, before I ask you any questions in regards to what had happened, I'm going to read you what's called the warning and consent form. These are your Miranda warning legal rights. Have you ever heard of your Miranda warning rights?
Yeah, anybody who watches TV hears them.
Okay, so you've heard of them before, right? Okay. Byron, before we ask you any questions, you must understand what your rights are. You have the right to remain silent. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Anything you say can be used against you in court. Do you understand that?
I understand that.
Okay. You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we question you and to have him with you during questioning. Do you understand that?
I understand that, and I waive that considering the circumstances.
Okay. If you cannot afford a lawyer and want one, a lawyer will be provided for you. Understand that, Barry?
I understand that.
Okay. If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you will still have the right to stop answering at any time. You also have the right to stop answering at any time until you talk to a lawyer. Do you understand that, Barry?
I understand that.
Okay.
I may choose to skip one question or whatever. But
That's your choice, yes, by all means, Byron. And then, Byron, with your rights in mind, are you willing to talk to me at this time?
Yes,
Okay. Do you have any questions about your rights that I explained to you?
it's very clear.
Okay. And you're willing to talk with me and can about any questions I have in regards to this?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Byron, I got called out to your residence today, basically on some information that something might have happened at your house either today or yesterday.
More specifically, I called my good friend Bill Anderson, who is a neighbor,
Okay.
and asked him to contact a lawyer. He wasn't able to. Apparently, they're all busy today. The offices are closed.
Okay.
Since he was not able to contact a lawyer, I asked him to contact the Morrison County Sheriff's Department next.
Okay. You asked him to, Bill Anderson?
I asked him to call you.
Okay. And then, now, Bill, how long have you known Bill Anderson?
Basically, since he moved in, it must be 20, 25 years.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's more than that. Anyway, long
For a
time.
long time, okay. How long have you lived at your residence there?
I have been physically resident since March 2009. However, it has been my home of record since the house was built in September of '66.
Okay. So you've had that place for quite a long time then,
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
It has always been my home. and before that we lived on the west side.
Okay. Do you live at the residence with anybody, or do you live by yourself?
I am by myself. My mother passed away 3 years ago.
Okay. Now, you said that you had talked, and you called and talked with Bill Anderson. When did you call and talk with Bill Anderson?
I first called him about 11:30 this morning.
Okay. And then when you called Bill, did you ask him for something, is that correct?
Bill is the only person I have shared the breaking and entering series with.
Okay.
As a neighbor, I feel it's important, and I trust him absolutely.
Sure. So when you called Bill, you said this morning at about 11:30 it was, right?
I said that I had a problem, and I would appreciate it if he got a lawyer and asked him to come over to my house.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know the local lawyers very well. I
Sure.
have, almost nothing. But Bill seems to know everybody.
Okay. All right. And was he able to get a hold of a lawyer for you or anything?
No, he wasn't.
No. Okay.
He totally failed. He even tried Brainerd.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
he did find a couple, but they are only involved in, minor stuff like deeds and wills.
Sure. And just to confirm with you, it's your choice at this time that you wish to waive or have an attorney present with you while you talk to me, correct?
Yes, and if I find anything that I object to, I'll let you know. Okay. Immediately and clearly.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Now, how many times did you talk with Bill Anderson about this?
Oh, there was just today?
Yeah.
Today, we had back and forth phone calls. There must have been 10 or 12 when he was calling me with the latest. I was calling him with, that didn't work. What next?
Okay. You initially told Bill that somebody broke into your house, is that correct?
Oh, Bill knew that somebody broke into my house, yes.
Okay.
He knew that there was a sequence going. He didn't know that it had happened again.
Okay.
And I tried to be very non-specific, but he could guess.
Okay. Did you specifically tell Bill that you had maybe shot somebody that broke into your house or anything? Or?
No, but
Okay.
Bill knows that I was having a major problem and that I might do something.
Okay. So you've actually been having problems with people breaking into your house, is that correct?
The same people, the same pattern. It goes back a long time.
Okay. When did that start? When did it start where people
First
were
time
breaking
it
into your
happened
house?
was, I'm guessing, 12 to 15 years ago, and there was a sheriff's report on it when they broke into the garage and tore up a bunch of packing cases, threw glassware on the floor to break it, and stole a bunch of clothing.
Okay.
Now, I try to not be sexist, but when somebody steals clothing and ignores the tools, I tend to think it's a woman.
Okay. What kind of clothing did they take? You remember that time? Was it women's clothes or men's clothes? Something different?
Military clothes, the kind of unisex stuff that...
Sure.
And not only that, but the following week, Ashley Williams was seen wearing my Flightline military jacket from the Air Force to school.
Okay. Ashley Williams, you said?
Yeah.
And how do you know this Ashley Williams?
I've never met her,
Okay.
except maybe now, and then it's not sure, but I've never met her.
Okay. But you heard that somebody saw her, or you saw her?
Bill has close relationship with the schools because he does fundraising, and he asked, and this was reported to him.
Okay.
However, since it was gossip and rumor, it wasn't official evidence.
Okay. So you heard, Bill told you that he saw Ashley Williams potentially wearing
He
some of
didn't
your
see her.
clothing?
He heard that she had been wearing
Okay.
it.
Okay.
And you should check this with him because I want to be totally accurate on, but I assume he saw her wearing it to the bus.
Okay. And this was like a camouflage jacket?
No,
coat shirt?
I was in 68 through 72, and at that time everything was olive drab. And at that time, they stitched the reflective stripes on the coats for use on flight lines. Shortly after that, they shifted to requiring vests, with the full reflective and colors and everything. So this coat, 20 years later, was very rare. You know, it's not the sort of thing you would find laying around, and mine was gone, and she was seen wearing it. So there was some reasonable suspicion there. And apparently she was not in full possession of her facilities because she dropped stuff all the way home that Bill collected the next morning.
From your house?
Yeah, well, stuff that she had collected in her arms, and it was falling out of her arms on the way home.
So kind of a trail from where she had broken into?
That trail of dropped stolen stuff she was taking home.
Did that trail of broken or dropped stuff, was that in your yard at all?
Yeah, it was down the driveway,
Okay.
leading towards their house.
So is Ashley Williams a neighbor of yours, your guys's?
My closest neighbor.
Okay. So she lives, what, right next door?
At the end of my rather large yard.
Okay. Okay.
So, yes, they are my closest neighbor.
Okay. Do you know Ashley's parents at all?
I have tried very hard to avoid them.
Okay.
They're nasty people.
Okay. You've never gotten along with them?
I have avoided not getting along with them.
Okay.
They have misused and abused too many other people I know for me to have anything to do with them. I limit myself to being polite.
Okay.
You know, if I see them by the mailbox, I'll say good morning.
Mm-hmm.
I've never intentionally talked with them about anything, except last year. The spruce in the neighborhood have a fungus disease. And I went to the door and gave them a Xerox copy of how to identify it and how to treat it, just because getting rid of an infection in the neighborhood's a good thing. There was no social interaction. They took the paper and shut the door.
Okay. Okay.
But
And this Ashley, do you know where she's still currently living at home with her parents?
she's in and out a lot.
Okay. So you've seen her there recently?
I haven't seen her. I know what her car looks like.
Okay.
Because Bill pointed it out to me.
Okay.
Bill watches everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he pointed out her car, and I see it there occasionally.
Okay.
Occasionally meaning like several times a month, maybe a couple times a week.
What kind of car does she drive?
It's a white Volvo thing with an ugly, coming apart, green vinyl roof.
Okay. Was she ever there with a boyfriend that you saw, or another boy, or?
They're too far away from my house to see.
Sure, I was just wondering if you ever saw that. Okay. And so you've heard and suspect that Ashley Williams had been breaking into your place on different occasions. Is that correct to say?
Yes.
Okay. And now, in particular, you had an incident that happened just recently at your house, a break-in, correct?
Yeah.
When did this happen?
That would be about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And the break-in occurred by kicking in the panel on the basement door.
Okay.
The paneling around the door was shattered, and then they reached through that panel to open up the deadbolt and the knob lock.
Okay. Were you home at the time this happened?
No.
Okay. Do you know if this happened during the day or at night?
Very specifically, I left to go shopping at St. Cloud 11:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back at 6 o'clock, the place had been thoroughly gone through with the missing items as shown in the report.
Okay.
So, I know for sure it happened exactly when I was gone. And it's right down to within, 5 or 6 hours, which makes me suspect that it was someone who saw me come and go.
Okay. Okay.
Beyond that, the following day, on Sunday, I was at the adjacent property to the north, which I bought as an investment.
Mm-hmm.
I had not been there since Thursday. Sometime between Thursday and Sunday afternoon. The break-in at my house was exactly Saturday afternoon. Sometime between Thursday and Sunday afternoon, the garage sidewalk door was kicked open, brutally, frame shattered, lock ruined. Inside the garage, boxes were opened and tipped and dumped. I wasn't keeping anything of value there, so there was nothing to steal, but the place was made a mess of. Then there's a basement door on the southwest corner of that house. The basement door was kicked in. Again, frame shattered, lock ruined. And throughout the house, storage closets were left with the doors open and drawers were left half open.
Okay. Did you call and report that incident, Byron?
I turned in a written report to Jamie asking him to investigate.
Okay.
I have not had confirmation that he investigated, but I assume he did.
Okay.
I would like to get a copy of that as also. So anyway, yeah, I reported the time limits that I observed and the damage that I observed and asked him to verify and document it.
Okay.
There was also a tool bag stolen, and Ashley ignores tools, but it looks like she wanted the bag because there were tools left alongside the bag that weren't taken, but it was a nice bag.
So you suspect a female party stole it?
It's the same pattern all the way through.
Okay.
He starts off the interrogation talking. Well, so yeah, maybe playing some of the interrogation would be helpful. He starts off by saying that this has been going on for a really long time. The first time that they broke in was 10 to 15 years ago.
Oh my.
And he goes into basically an explanation of a situation where somebody went into part of his house and they ended up stealing what just sort of on the surface sounded like some old clothes. That's what I got out of it. And the neighbor girl, Ashley Williams, was seen by a different neighbor wearing the jacket to school. And without doing anything about it, he assumed that Ashley Williams had broken into his house and stolen the jacket. And so it's kind of an accumulation over all this time that he's attributing these specific elements of that lead him to this point, to this family.
So weird.
And it's never addressed in the Dateline. Without listening to the interrogation, you wouldn't know. If you listen to the audio of the incident, it comes up and he says both the mother and the father are psychotic or borderline psychotic or something like that. And he was waiting for them to come see why their children hadn't returned to kill him.
Wait, he thought more people were gonna. Oh, Jesus.
Yes. Okay. So here's how it went down on Dateline. There's video surveillance of a quote man end quote approaching the house and walking around, casing it, and then eventually, after a few minutes go by, and they decide that nobody's there, breaking a window, that's interesting because previously the door was kicked in, I believe. A broken window is like a huge red flag that a burglary has occurred.
Right.
According to his sister, Nick Brady had worked for Byron Smith over a summer. And since he was only 17, like it was probably the previous summer or maybe the summer before that, he had done some like yard work for him. And that's, I guess, how he set his sights on robbing the place. But the window wasn't like a little window where they put a little hole in it to open the door. Like he smashed the entire thing out, and it's very loud on the audio. He comes in, you can hear him walking around. It's so eerie. Like, I see why Dateline didn't play it all. But, so he's walking around and then he comes down the stairs and, Byron Smith shoots him. I believe he shoots him twice and then one more time. So 3 times. And then time passes, like, I think it's 12 minutes. And then Haley comes in and she's walking around and you hear her say, like, Nick. She's looking for her cousin. She comes down the stairs and you hear her die. She is shot 6 times. So the whole time this is happening, this Byron Smith, the homeowner, he's rambling to himself. Like, it's very interesting to listen to what he's saying. He even, for one thing, he's audio recording it. It's very strange, right? He set up an audio recorder and put it on his bookshelf. But here's the thing. He moved his vehicle. Okay, now that's where I feel like his whole defense fell apart, because he acts, so like during the 3rd interrogation, he acts surprised, like, oh, that must have been why they came, because I moved my truck. It doesn't make any sense that he moved his vehicle like a block away or something like that. I don't know what he was getting at, except the point at trial was that he was baiting someone. Okay. So before he has any idea that he's going to have his home be broken into, he makes a phone call to his brother and it sounds like he's talking to an answering machine, and he says, whenever you have a chance tomorrow, sooner rather than later, please come over. And he says some other weird stuff, right? And so he has, it's pure happenstance that Nick Brady and Haley Kiefer end up there. And not only do they end up there, they end up there within an hour of him baiting the situation, okay? Like, they don't drive by his house on the way home or whatever. Like, they went out of their way to go rob this place, and the timing is crazy, okay? It's Thanksgiving Day. The truck isn't in the driveway. They have said that there is evidence that Nick had robbed him previously, but none of that is proven anywhere. There's no question that there were robberies. It's just questionable if he was actually involved or not. There is no question that Nick broke into the house. The evidence is, it's about as good as it could get.
Even the sheriff admits they found a lot of evidence that had happened. Yeah.
Right. And so he goes into the house and his cousin follows him. Leading up to this point, there's a little bit of, and I know that the tape ran for 6 hours and I didn't listen to 6 hours worth of audio. So I'm not sure like how much is cut out, but I imagine it's just blank air, right? But the times that he is talking, so he is getting ready to kill somebody. Okay. He makes the comment in the audio that, well, I know I realize I don't have an appointment, but I'd like to see one of the attorneys here. Like, he's rehearsing all this stuff out loud. It's weird. I was left with the impression that either he was faking it very well, okay, or he legitimately thought he had killed the Williams kids.
Oh, wow.
Well, here's what he says. He said that he had done impressions of the shoes that had previously broken into his house when they kicked in the door, and that he checked both of the kids that he shot. He checked both of their feet. And she had on boots, so the shoes didn't match her, which he thought was weird because he thought it was Ashley Williams. Now, this is an 18-year-old girl. So it didn't register in his mind that there was no way this 18-year-old girl could have been the one who broke into his house 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah, he didn't understand the age problem there, I guess.
Well, and so he says that the boy's shoes or the man's shoes matched. He then goes on to, he's asked by the investigators what each one of these kids was wearing. And he says, well, the male was dressed like a high schooler, but he was much too old. But he was 17. He was a high schooler. And he had worked for him the previous summer, but he didn't recognize him.
I think what we need to do here, I think I need to listen to more of this audio because I did not hear as much as you described. And I think I need to drop in.
Do you want me to send you the...
Yeah, just send me the links to it to listen to YouTube or Dateline or whatever.
Bruce, stop by tomorrow morning. No rush, but as soon as convenient. Can you do that? Yeah. Park to the north. 100 yards north of the corner, and walk in from the west. I realize I don't have an appointment, but I would like to see one of the lawyers here.
You're dead. Oh, sorry about that. You're dying. Bitch. I'm safe now. Cute. I'm sure she thought she was a real pro. No rush, but, you know, when it's convenient for you. Check out the waffle apron. Check out the jacket trend. I feel a little bit safer. Not totally safe. I'm still shaking a bit, but a little bit safer. No rush, but, you know, as convenient for you. I left my house at 11:30. They were both dead by 1. I refuse to live in fear. I felt like I was cleaning up a mess. Worse than spilled food. Worse than vomit. Worse than shit. Cleaning up a mess. You're dead. There was a major complication in my life. You really don't want to know. Believe me, you don't want to know. I am not a bleeding heart liberal. I felt like I was cleaning up a mess. Not like spilled food. Not like vomit. Not even like diarrhea. The worst mess possible. And I was stuck with it. respect. And some tiny little respect. I was doing my civic duty. Because the law enforcement system couldn't handle it, and I had to do it. I had to do it. The law system couldn't handle her. And it fell in my lap. And she dropped her problem in my lap. And she threw her problem in my face, and I had to clean it up. I have not yet called the sheriff. They weren't human. I don't see them as human. I see them as vermin. Social mistakes, social problems. I don't see them as human. I see them as social defense. This bitch was going to go through her life spoiling things for other people. Thieving, robbing, drug use.
On the out,
Just too cold. The gravel driveway is blocked. You have to go north to the next one north of that. Then park 100 yards north of the corner and walk in from the west. Until somebody shoots you. It's all fun, cool, and exciting, and highly profitable until somebody kills you. It's begging to have him shoot me. That's like begging to have him shoot me. Yep. You can see the rugs on the basement floor. It's a sucker shot. People going down strange stairs naturally watch the steps. Like I give a damn who she is. Like I care who she is. No risk. I'm sorry. So much regret. I try to be a good person. I try to do what I should, be friendly to other people, help them when I can. Try to be a good citizen, not cheat people, be fair. That family raises a bad person like this. try to be a decent person. They think I'm a patsy. I'm a sucker. They think I'm there for them to take advantage of. Is that the reward for being a good person? And then they dump this mess on me. It's not a mess like spilled food. It's not a mess like vomit. It's not even a mess like diarrhea. It's far worse. And they take slice after slice out of me. $5,000 slice, $10,000 slice. And if I gather enough evidence, they might be prosecuted. If they're prosecuted, it might go to court. If it goes to court, they might be found guilty. If they're found guilty, they might spend 6 months, 2 years in jail. And then they're out, and they need money worse than ever, and they're filled with revenge. I cannot live a life like that. I cannot have that chewing on me for the rest of my life. I cannot. I refuse to live with that level of fear in my life. I refuse to live with that level of fear in my life. She's tough. She's hard, Candy. This game is exciting and it's highly profitable. Somebody kills you. Until you go too far, somebody kills you. Until you take advantage of somebody who's not a sucker. Until you try to take advantage of somebody who's not a sucker, who's not a patsy.
Hello, Chris. Going okay. Got some stuff in the out tonight. Would you stop by? There's no particular. Okay. Okay, there's no particular rush, but earlier would be better. Okay, also, drive to the far north. Don't take the dirt driveway. It's chained off. Go north of them. And then park 200 yards past the corner and walk in from the west. Also, it's snowing, so wear some shoes that won't soak up too much water. Okay, don't worry about anything. Anything's under control. No, I won't be upstairs. So just come as soon as convenient, but no drastic. Okay, see you then. Okay, goodbye.
Mother and father are semi-psychotic, are both semi-psychotic. I put even odds that one or the other will come over here with a gun. I received a death threat. I recorded it. You'll get a copy of it. I get a death threat. You'll get a copy of it. I give you a copy of a death threat. I expect you to do something about it.
So in our our little Thanksgiving extravaganza here, you had me go listen to a lot of material, a lot of stuff that you wanted to point out to me about Byron Smith.
Right.
And so
Was it worth it?
Yeah, like I mean, okay, so first of all, I checked out a lot of written materials on this case, and then I went, while I was doing that, I listened to the Dateline, because you gave me the Dateline episodes. I listened to his own interrogation, and then I listened and watched to the different recording media that came into this case, including, I think, what I'm including in this episode. There's like I'm using clips of his interrogation, so people will have heard that. And then I'm using the clips of him in his house because it's creepy. And then I have some add-on stuff that I'm throwing in. But you had pointed out a couple of things when we first started talking about this on recording. You were basically saying the Dateline doesn't wrap some stuff up. And man, you're right. It's not just that. The investigation, the court case, all of that sort of ignores some stuff about Byron Smith.
It really does. And I felt like it did so to his detriment.
Absolutely. I don't know how to express all of the very strong opinions I have about this case, because the last thing I did this is last night. I went through all of the court documents related to this case. Have you seen how many court documents this case has created?
Yeah.
Up until 2021, they were still working on deciding aspects of this case. The Byron Smith killings themselves, the way this case breaks out, if you just read it in a glaring overview, it starts in 2012 when the murders occur. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The last official, I don't know what ruling you want to talk about, but the last official court appearance in this case was actually March 23rd, 2021.
Right. And that was the Circuit District Court basically agreeing with the Minnesota Supreme Court, right?
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court also kicked the case out.
They
but
denied
yes,
certiorari. But that wasn't that ruling, was it?
That may have been a little later on,
because it made its way through the state court system, and then it went to federal court because they raised the constitutional question, which has jurisdiction in federal court if it makes it there. And the question that they were raising had already been decided, and the court basically just agreed with the previous opinions, and so they didn't make any changes.
He lost his civil case, or it may not have been directly civil, but basically he ends up on the hook for the funeral expenses for the teenagers to the tune of some restitution or a civil penalty, or
It's about $20,000, but you saw why, right?
Yeah. I saw
because he responded a day late.
Yeah. Here's the deal with all of this. I'm totally curious. First of all, do you think Byron Smith is guilty of murder?
Well, that's sort of a loaded question, but I would say yes, I do. I think that he murdered somebody. I don't think there's really a question as to whether or not he murdered somebody.
I didn't ask if he murdered somebody. I said, do you think he's guilty of murder?
I do.
Okay, so you think he murdered somebody and he is guilty of murder?
How could you have murdered somebody and not be guilty of murder?
By my reading of what Minnesota has done with what. Okay, so the controversy here, I guess I need to put cart, horse, all that stuff together here.
It's really hard to kind of articulate everything. I understand.
This case, the gist of this case is Byron Smith is convicted. He is in prison for this. The investigation in this case, if you go take the Wikipedia nutshell, it works like this. Smith doesn't report that he has killed these two people immediately. He waits until the next day to notify the police that he shot them. He didn't want to bother the police on Thanksgiving.
That's really exaggerated, but I'm sure that you heard in the interrogation of him that he says that it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense why he did that at that point.
Yeah. He's not have abbreviated.
They've made a big deal out of it in mainstream media that was his reasoning.
Right. I am abbreviating this, like I said, to the Wikipedia nutshell.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So they find out that these kids have been stealing from multiple people, including their own family members, up until the night before they are killed. And the gist of this is it creates this giant problem under the Castle Doctrine. Now, the Castle Doctrine is the doctrine where you're allowed to defend your home, your dwelling, your abode.
Correct.
And again, this is Wikipedia nutshell for people to understand this, and really so that you and I can talk to each other about it where people can hear it. The Wikipedia nutshell is that legal analysts have stated that the initial shootings most likely would have been justified under Minnesota's laws, but the subsequent shots were not justified once the threat had been removed. Sheriff Wetzel, who's the guy that's attached in this, his name is Mikkel Wetzel. He said that the law doesn't permit you to execute somebody once a threat is gone. He's wrong, by the way. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that. It makes me really mad. He's wrong. He's wrong. He's wrong. Okay, I said it. Hamline University School of Law professor Joseph Olson said, I think the first shot is justified after the person is no longer a threat because they're seriously wounded, the application of self-defense is over. Also, very wrong. Very, 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 very wrong. He's right in a bunch of states, but in Minnesota, they're wrong. So in addition to the home surveillance system, Byron recorded 6 hours of audio on a digital recorder in the basement of the residence. That is playing on here, so you guys can hear it. It is gapped down to just a couple of minutes, 20 minutes, but it's worth hearing. Prior to the break-in,
it's worth hearing, yeah.
Prior to the break-in, he's heard saying different things. The prosecution talks about this relating to the killings, but in a nutshell, everyone up the line has ruled that this case is not a case of the Castle Doctrine. It is not a case of stand your ground. And I'm just going to tell you, I am just a lone podcaster right now sitting here yelling into a microphone. Every person who is ruled on this case is not only wrong, some of them have also committed misconduct. Under Minnesota law, and this is where I'm trying to keep myself in check because, you guys don't get to hear these episodes because I get so bent out of shape that Meg cannot deal with my nonsense. But I'm asking her to deal with me on just this one thing of nonsense because in 1968 and 1973, Minnesota culled their self-defense law down to a single sentence that basically says a homicide is considered justifiable when when the actor is defending or preventing a felony in their own abode. That's it. That's the gist of the sentence. The sentence is not interpreted further. This does not end up applying in its interpretations. I don't know why, but the thing about that is it doesn't say that you're allowed to commit bodily injury. You're allowed to defend yourself with a weapon. That's not what it says. It just says you're allowed to kill someone to do certain things. And this falls under it. And everything about these second shots and all of this other stuff, that's not covered in any law in the United States. Okay? It's definitely not covered in Minnesota. And in my opinion, this is how it breaks down for me. They use these tapes. The prosecution uses this. It's a really long audio tape. They cut out the gaps. Everybody agrees that they're going to use this big piece of tape where he says different things. It's him self-talking. And they kind of key it up and cue it up as premeditation. And that's not what it is. All this guy is doing, he is sick of these fucking children breaking into his house. He's not even sure who they are. He's not even sure that they're children, but he is already walking himself through the process in his head where he realizes that if they break back into his house, he doesn't have the stomach to wound them. He won't know when they're getting there where he can call the police. He doesn't think that the police are going to take him seriously because he's already interacted with them. In his mind, the police have failed to stop these children. He has decided that whoever breaks into his house to steal his stuff yet, and at this point, they have taken tens of thousands of dollars from him, and they have taken absolutely priceless family heirlooms from him. They have taken his weapons. He has decided that whoever it is may have a weapon to defend themselves, and they are not going to make it out of his house alive. And by golly, he makes it happen. This is a terrified man who is suffering from paranoia and his own mental illness because of the actions of people breaking into his home. He is literally the poster child for why the castle doctrine exists. I mean, I think a lot of people think of like the housewife with a shotgun when they think of the castle doctrine. That's not it. It's this guy who has lived all around the world and never had to deal with this nonsense before, has moved to his hometown. He's got a little house. He wants to live in peace and quiet. The castle doctrine in Minnesota is designed to protect him. These idiots were committing a felony in his house. It doesn't matter how many times he shoots them. If they want that to be a thing in Minnesota law, that's okay. Say you can only shoot them one time. This guy, under exigent circumstances, which this applies to because he is scared for his life, he is scared to the point that he doesn't even call the police. That's why he really doesn't call the police. It's not because he doesn't want to bother them on Thanksgiving. It's because he is terrified that he has taken another human life. Not just one, he took two. But these assholes, there's a very simple solution to how these murders don't happen. Don't break into his house on that day. He doesn't kill you. That is the only solution to this. If you break into his house, you committed the felony, the act is over. He couldn't stop you from committing the felony. So he is now allowed to kill you. That's what the law says there. I'm not some crazy gun nut. I'm not a bleeding heart liberal. I'm just telling you that is what the law says. This man was terrified. He did not want to lose any more of his stuff or his money or his peace of mind to these people. And we put him in jail, in life in prison without parole ×2. That is terrible. Okay, my rant is over now.
Okay. Well, and I hear what you're saying. And it seems, well, except for your ranting part of it, it seems like a reasonable argument. There's a lot of there was a lot of controversy over this whole thing. You know, these kids they broke into his house and that had a terrible effect on him. Now, you were talking about the castle doctrine and, a person is the king of their castle or queen of their castle. And here in the United States, we have a doctrine is a widely understood interpretation of a set of laws, right? So it's a, not really a theory, but it's sort of what you can expect laws to mean. The castle doctrine is supported in some ways on a federal level, which would mean that all the states are going to have some way in place for all of the citizens, regardless of what state you live in, to protect yourself and to protect your family, right? And so in any situation where you become a criminal defendant based on the fact that you have shot someone, and you're taken into custody and you're arrested for it, you have to have defenses, right? Your defense of your actions. And so the castle doctrine is a kind of an arm of self-defense. So when you are having your trial and defending yourself against murder charges, you are going to be saying that it's justified because you were defending yourself. And then you bring in to account the different aspects that apply with different doctrines that apply at whatever level you're being, like here it was state court. He was being charged by the state of Minnesota.
Right.
So along with the Castle Doctrine, there are a couple of considerations that have presented pretty stark divides. And it's actually one of the things that makes such a big difference in this case, because I don't know if you're familiar with, stand your ground and duty to retreat. So in states that allow you to stand your ground, you have no duty to retreat. And in states where you have a duty to retreat, you effectively can't really stand your ground. I know that it was a big deal during the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case. And if this case had taken place in a stand your ground state, all of your arguments would have been completely correct. Minnesota is not a stand your ground state. And so there's an implication. Minnesota law doesn't really support a typical castle doctrine. The statutes lend themselves to allow them to protect themselves, can only protect themselves. They can't go that extra step. And I feel like the biggest thing that when you said, do you think that Byron is a murderer? And I said, yes. Or you said, do you think Byron is guilty of murder? And I said, yes. I feel like the biggest piece of evidence against him was the audio, specifically the audio 30 seconds of each killing.
I think he thought that the recordings were going to protect him.
Yeah, I agree. And in a stand your ground state, you would be right. Minnesota is not a stand your ground state.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Minnesota is it's called a retreat only when you can get to absolute safety. And also what contradicts that is Minnesota also has aspects of the felony murder rule related to burglary and sexual assault. So the problem is until they leave his house, they're both committing another crime. So here's how it works. They come in, you hear the felony on the audio. That's the breaking. Then you hear them entering. You hear the first murder. The minute that girl enters, she is able to be charged with what would be felony murder. She is now an accomplice to her accomplice's murder in Minnesota. The interesting part about Minnesota's law is all the other laws, which this would be Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Nebraska, New Jersey, New York, and Rhode Island, partly Wisconsin. All the other states that require you to retreat, they spell it out for you. They say it for you in a way that you understand that is the case. Under Minnesota law, there are 3 statutes that references what happened here. And these are the exact statutes. Reasonable force may be used upon or toward the person of another without the other's consent when the following circumstances exist or the actor reasonably believes them to exist. When used by any person in lawful possession of real or personal property and resisting unlawful interference with such property. That is how it starts, and that is what they consider to be their castle doctrine. A different statute altogether addresses the intentional taking of the life of another is not authorized except when necessary in resisting or preventing an offense which the actor reasonably believes exposes the actor or another to great bodily harm or death, or preventing the commission of a felony in the actor's place of abode. And then there's a third addressed statute that says in criminal trials, the court shall only decide questions of law, except in cases of criminal defamation. The jury shall decide all questions of facts. So those 3 things together mean that this case has not been decided according to Minnesota law. And that it doesn't, like, my opinion on whether he committed murder, didn't commit murder, guilty of murder, I think he committed murder. Under Minnesota law, he's not guilty of murder. That is what my opinion on the case. The problem comes in how they twisted the case. The cops in this case think they're lawyers, and the lawyers in this case think they're cops. But the truth is, everybody should have been defending Byron Smith. If they had done their jobs as cops when they came out for the first burglary or the second burglary or any of the other 18 burglaries in the neighborhood, we wouldn't be in this position.
I get that. See, I'm not really great at
No, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm not knocking your side of it. I'm just saying your side isn't supported by Minnesota law. Everybody else, all those other states I named, including sort of Wisconsin, they spell it out. They say you have a duty to retreat. Minnesota just says this is the only way that you're allowed to defend yourself. They don't give you a duty to retreat. They don't give you an absolute duty to do anything when it comes to it. That's why so they don't specifically state that you can stand your ground in their statutes, but they don't implicitly state that you cannot. They have this weird middle ground. And what I was sort of the argument we were having as I was going through all this wonderful material, and it really is wonderful to be able to listen to a case like this, because it's very rare that we have audio from the scene of the crime, you know what I mean? And also have the guy's interrogation, which I've used clips of them here. I'm going to put links to them in the show notes, because if you're interested in cases like this is a fascinating way to enjoy some turkey leftovers and listen to this. I'm serious. I had bad impressions of the family overall, so I don't want to say anything about them. And the family I'm referencing is like the family of the victims, and they were victims of a homicide. Civilly, I feel like Byron Smith would be on the hook for their deaths. Criminally, he's not. And like the fact that Minnesota has made him be is a violation of Minnesota's law. I'm really trying to keep my I'm trying to keep my rant to a minimum here. It really makes me mad.
I understand that. And I wish I could put it in different words that would be better to be understood.
But okay, so can I ask you some questions about this case after having reviewed all this material?
Sure.
Do you think that Byron Smith is mentally ill?
I do. Or some sort of diminished capacity.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Do you have an opinion as to, do you think he's psychotic, or do you think
I just think
traumatized?
Well, that's possible, but I think that I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, and
I know.
But I think that he was suffering from for one thing, kind of being isolated, and he didn't have a great perspective on what was happening.
Yeah.
And then he started getting really paranoid, because I don't think the police were taking him very seriously in what he considered to be very serious matters. What do you think would have happened? So let me, can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah.
All right. So let's say that let's say that all of his guns were stolen and he didn't purchase any new guns, and he was in his home that day, and the same thing happened. Do you think that the kids would have physically attacked him?
Yeah, I do.
And do you think that it would have, how would that have gone down?
The big bully kid, so the guy that he shot was on record as being a bully with multiple people. And they talk about it in Dateline they sort of make fun of it in Dateline. They've got this one kid whose parents were friends with Byron, and they put him up there. And he's like, yeah, Byron would be the kid who, not Byron, Nick, I think is his name, would be the kid that put you up against your locker and took your lunch money. But according to what didn't come in court during one of the suppression hearings, the boy who died at the hands of Byron's gun, or at the end of Byron's gun, had severe disciplinary problems at school to the point of expulsion. And if that is true, the boy that was in the house had already had multiple allegations of assault through multiple kids, and he did not have it. He was basically, burglary had become his life. He had allegedly pistol whipped someone. So
I was wondering, it's so weird to me, they just dropped all that, because he's never been charged with anything.
The boy? Well, he's dead. By the time they put it all together, he's dead.
But
They said they didn't have his fingerprints until very late because I read the fingerprint thing incorrectly. But here's the crazy part about it all. The only person in charge of those kids being alive or dead was those kids. And that girl laughs at him on that tape. She chuckles on the tape. I think those kids would have hurt him. He strikes me as sort of a pencil pusher. Byron does. And I think they would have hurt him, whether inadvertently or on purpose. Or the alternative situation is if he froze up, I think he would have carried stuff out to the car for them, if you know what I mean. Like help them rob him.
I guess that'll just always be something I'll have to wonder
Yeah.
about, because I don't like the kid. He was, in my opinion, pretty small in stature compared to the man. I mean, he was a kid.
I guess what I heard was in the autopsy description. We took a pause for me to try and find a verification of like the size differences between Nick and Byron in this case. And I can't find it. And the autopsy description, it doesn't contradict what I was saying, but it also doesn't support it necessarily. So what I sent you there, sort of the interim, I guess, it's not the best source on the planet, comes out of the Daily Mail. Since I can't support the other side of this, I will say from this April 2014 article, there's a lot of stuff left out of this case. And this is where I think I'm going to hang my hat instead of the size difference. I cannot say whether or not there was a difference between Smith and Nick Brady. What I can say is that in the pictures I see of Smith, he looks to be like pretty normal sized dude. Brady is described as a bully in a couple of the online media that's available for this, and in the episode of Dateline. I'm gonna go back to this, and I'm gonna back up my rant for a second, just a little hair. I think where this case hangs in not being successful on appellate matters. And in fact, I think I told you that I think the only way that you could win this case would be if someone were trying to appeal this case and get it back in front of a jury again. I think you would have to go after either something related to it being an incompetent defense, which I think you could do, or prosecutorial misconduct, which I think that argument could also be made.
What would be their misconduct?
The misconduct, I think, would be in trying the case at all. Because once a case like this, the same way it's true that Minnesota does not put limits or boundaries on justifiable homicides related to its very specific but open-ended Castle doctrine. It's not really even a Castle doctrine so much and as you pointed out, it's not a stand your ground state. It just isn't a state that defines the retreat.
Well, it kind of does.
It doesn't in statute or precedent, but
Well, the word necessary is what defines it.
so you feel like the word necessary in which part of it? Except when necessary in resisting or preventing?
Hold on just a second.
And while you're doing that, I will say that this is where the appeals have died, and that is that in criminal trials, the court shall decide questions of law, except in cases of criminal defamation, the jury shall decide questions of fact. So
Right, but the
jury
issues
deciding
on
he lied in
appeal-
wait.
The issues on appeal haven't had anything to do with much about anything related to the Castle doctrine. The only things that were on appeal were the judge not allowing the defense to call. Well, they allowed them to call him, but they wouldn't allow information about the accusing Nicholas Brady of prior burglary because the court said it's clear from all the evidence that is available from the defendant's own mouth that you have to go by the information he had on that day. And the fact that this has come up like in between the incident and then the trial, like it doesn't reflect, just because there's been allegations or whatever you want to say that Nicholas Brady was previously responsible for some of the other things that happened, he didn't know it that day. And so based on that, the court would not allow the testimony of several witnesses to be called by the defense, or they could be called, they just couldn't talk about the allegations of prior bad acts specifically having to do with anything that was alleged that Nicholas Brady did at Byron Smith's house before this particular incident. And so they took that to the appellate court, and the appellate court, they agreed with the trial court's ruling on it. And then the other issue was a question of the fact that when they were going to discuss that matter, they cleared the courtroom. And you're entitled to it's a constitutional...
An open court, yeah.
And when they shut it down, so what it was, according to one of the courts that reviewed it, the amount of the proceeding that was shut down to the public amounted to 0.1% of the total transcript.
Okay.
And the courts have unanimously stated there was one differing opinion but concurrence in the result. That there was a little bit of ambiguity because it was before the jury was sworn in with regard to whether or not it was administrative or procedural. And the arguments have flown off the handle, but ultimately they've said that even in the event that, it was somehow unconstitutional, that it was such a small part of this overwhelmingly public trial anyway. And they did release the transcripts of the hearing. So all they did was clear the courtroom. Anyway, those are the only things that have been brought up. Earlier on, it was also appealed, the issue about the restitution for the two shooting victims' burial expenses. The state appealed that, and that was remanded because I don't know what the lower court had done, but they found that he was like a day or two late. He was a day late mailing it and a day late with his response to the request for restitution, which was like $10,000 and $9,000, and it was the burial expenses.
Yeah.
So those were the only issues. None of the Castle Doctrine stuff was brought up in any of the appeals.
No, it's part of the trial, but it's not part of the appeal. And ultimately, the trial itself boils down to these two sentences. The defendant said that he had been targeted in a series of break-ins. He feared for his life and fatally shot two teens in self-defense. The prosecution argued that Smith went too far in shooting the teens a total of 9 times, and the jury agreed. So that's what gets him the sentences. That's what gets him, put in prison for the rest of his life. And whether I agree with it or not, that's where it stands right now. I would say a number of things have been left out of this case, and now that it's been denied at the Supreme Court level, it would be very hard for it to come back into court. I think it could come back into court because I think the defense is missing something in terms of I'm not sure that this guy was competent to stand trial. I'm not sure that this guy really fully understood. I don't think Byron Smith understood what was going on. And I say that because he sort of gave us evidence of that, and the prosecution used that evidence against him.
Well, and it's interesting because in mounting a defense to 2 first-degree murder charges, I guess they had to pick their routes, where are we going? And they went with the self-defense, which is the natural course to take in this case. And I would say that without the audio of, him
Yeah, it's
talking
over.
to himself.
Without the audio, he's not convicted.
Well, I would still say that he would need to, because he would still have to overcome all of the shots fired. Because one thing that I was talking earlier about stand your ground versus duty to retreat, and I realized something during our little pause that really doesn't apply to your home. You actually never have a duty to retreat in your home. However,
Correct.
You have the right to defend yourself from harm. Now, depending on where you live in the United States, the right to defend your property sort of varies. And a lot of times, so in this instance with Byron Smith, I don't feel like the prosecutors had any sort of misconduct, because the jury just as easily could have found that he acted in self-defense. So they put on the case and the jury decides. And so anytime you were to be involved in killing someone, even in your own home, like, it could happen that you could be charged, and then you could be acquitted for it if they found that you had in fact followed what the Castle Doctrine requires. So I don't feel like that's necessarily any misconduct on their part. But, so having talked about earlier the stand your ground versus the duty to retreat, I don't want to say I take it all back, but in your home, you do have you have the ability to defend yourself. Now, you only have the ability to defend yourself to the extent that's necessary. So you can't, and I don't know, I don't feel like he thought he was doing this, but the audio shows that he waited to be able to see like half of their body before he shot them. He didn't say, "Can I help you?" He didn't say, "What are you doing here?" He didn't say, "Who are you?" He didn't say anything. So how could he have, there is the implied inference that somebody in your house is up to no good, right? And it's fine that he didn't say anything. And it would have been fine that he didn't say anything and he shot him one time. And if that one shot had killed them, he would have been acquitted under the Castle Doctrine. Okay. The problem lies in he doesn't say anything, and he doesn't say to the police when they are questioning him, what were you trying to do? He doesn't say, "I was trying to defend myself." He says, "I wanted him dead."
Yeah, but he doesn't even know who him is. And I think there's a significant amount of there's a problem with the interpretation of everything here. Basically, best case scenario, there's a point in time early in the defense portion of this trial, they have to throw the whole thing out and get a new jury, in my opinion. Well, the amount of evidence that the judge kept out is pretty extreme.
But it was ruled on appeal that they upheld that ruling.
No, that's not the evidence. So there's some parallel circumstances that get included in previous knowledge because of what you said. You're absolutely 100% correct. The appellate court ruled on it. My problem was it actually comes out in that Daily Mail article I referenced earlier, where these teenagers were basically treating his house like a candy store. I did not realize they had stolen over $42,000 from him.
But what we don't actually know, there was no conviction on that.
Doesn't matter. See, we're not talking about those kids in this matter. Like when we isolate their prior bad acts and say he didn't know who was there that day, here's where the prosecutorial misconduct comes in. The prosecutors then say, okay, we're arguing to keep that stuff out. However, He lied in wait. So when they lumped the premeditation on there, and the jury convicted him of both, which is also weird. They convicted him of first-degree murder with premeditation and second-degree murder. 2 counts of each. That's why he got life in prison, no parole. I don't, like, there's something wrong with this entire case. The more I look at it, the more things I find to nitpick. And I'm sure that, like this is one of those cases I would get very defensive over, because the idea that jurors answer the question, how many times are you allowed to shoot a person, as you said, that is necessary to stop them, is completely incorrect everywhere in the United States. But it's particularly untrue in Minnesota, because they state that that's the court has to be the one to decide that. And the court didn't decide that here. They left it completely open-ended for the prosecutors and the jury to sort of make a meal out of it and like just run all over this guy.
Don't you think, though, that that's why they presented the circumstances?
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Because what you've got is two dead drug addicts raised by other drug addicts who were breaking into homes and eventually going to become murderers themselves, or at least become ongoing burglars themselves.
I don't know that this is a constructive conversation. I feel like I haven't seen anything about drug use except
that girl had drugs in her system. They stopped the jury from hearing about it, and marijuana.
Right, and the boy didn't have anything.
Doesn't matter. The boy was committing the felony.
What is that? What is it about this that has you so on edge?
This guy was an Air Force engineer for years. He's a very particular type of personality. I'm not on edge about it. He didn't get an appropriate trial. And from what I can tell, his defense was lackluster.
Well,
but we expect him to understand with some level of precision that when you're scared for your life, you have to present it a certain way to the cops in the court, and you have to stop at one bullet. He is literally the person that Castle Doctrine is made for, unless you count like little old ladies who are, shooting a double barrel shotgun at a black masked intruder, like the ski masked intruder in their home. He's literally the person we defend. He served his country. He's trying to live peacefully in his house. From what I can tell, there are 11 reported break-ins to his residence, and one that he didn't report that was discovered, making a 12th break-in. And they think that it was something to the tune of $25,000 to $30,000 in cash. That could be someone's life savings that they have squirreled away the wrong way. But telling this man that he is going to prison and you've decided it's murder because he pulled the trigger too many times, that's just covering up for piss poor police work.
No, he went to prison for first-degree murder because he set out to murder them.
He didn't set out to murder anyone. He set out to stop the people from coming into his home and doing it again and again.
They asked him. They said, "What was your intent when you were doing this?" And he said, "I wanted him dead."
He didn't even see who it was. He shot him before he saw his face.
Which makes it that much worse.
So if someone came into your house right now and you wanted them dead, what would you tell the cops to make them leave you be? Like, how would that mean? Like anybody. Like, what is your advice to someone who has someone repeatedly breaking into their house? The next time they break in,
I was going to say, and why pretty much the only reason I'm continuing this conversation is because everybody needs to know, like, sort of where you stand. Do you think if we could have told Byron Smith, okay, this is what you're going to do, and this is what's going to happen, right? You're going to go to jail for first-degree murder, right? Regardless of right, wrong, or indifferent, it's what has played out. Do you think he would have still done what he did?
So what is the alternative that you tell Byron Smith? Because I'm thinking it's something like, you should call the police and let them handle this.
Well,
except
if somebody's
he did.
He didn't that
and
day,
they did
though.
Not. Doesn't matter. He didn't
does,
call
but
the police. They didn't handle it. He repeatedly called the police. They
let
repeatedly
me
didn't
ask you
handle it.
this. Why do you think that he waited till the next day?
Because he was absolutely petrified of confrontations and he had killed someone in his home.
He was going to defend himself.
He did defend himself. In my words, he defended himself in a way that you and every court on the planet and every court on other planets in the universe cannot convince me. Based on what I've heard from this guy, based on his interrogation, this guy probably has Asperger's or autism or something where he's really good at a particular type of lifestyle and he likes to be left alone. And when you don't leave him alone and you repeatedly do stupid things, he probably blows up a little bit. In this case, he didn't do that. He had to talk himself into defending himself.
Right,
and he did it successfully.
You're
So
talking
Matt's
about
not going
him
to.
calling the police repeatedly for break-ins, but
Correct.
he pauses when he's killed two people.
Because he had to do the police's job for him. It's a really hard thing to tell somebody you had to do their job for them.
But that's not really what
He
happened.
called in, yeah, that's what he said.
Okay,
He called
so
Bill
let me
Anderson and he
ask you
said,
this.
I
Let me
stopped
ask
the
you this.
break-ins.
When he, let's say that he had shot them to stop them and then called the police came and they took them into custody and then they went to trial. Do you think that they would have gotten a death sentence?
Do you think they would have been convicted of a felony?
More than likely, yes.
Then that's where the conversation ends. He didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't, I don't think the kids, no, I think the kids would never have seen the inside of a jail and they would have continued doing exactly what they're doing. He stopped it. That's what he called and told Bill
Right,
Anderson.
so
He said, I stopped it. He said, I
By killing
solved the
them.
break. He stopped the break-ins. That's all he said. He didn't think of it as killing them. He said he stopped the break-ins.
He told the police that he wanted them dead.
He told them he wanted them dead. I agree with you. He wanted them dead. He wanted whatever. I'd like to look at Little Falls River and see if Little River Falls has more or less break-ins after this happened, because I'm betting for a solid fucking year after this happened that like people were too scared to go and break into houses. But if it stopped altogether, I'm wondering, were these two kids the ones that were behind all of it?
They had a very, very low murder rate, like to begin with. I know you were saying break-ins,
Yeah.
but I didn't find the report on that. But like, there was like no murders.
Well, I'm relatively sure that Byron David Smith's house was responsible for like 90% of the break-ins in Minnesota for at least 3 months. I mean, I think of Minnesota as a very overall safe place with its city problems. I know that it has crime.
A baseball bat can be very satisfying.
Yeah, but here's the problem with a baseball bat. That motherfucker sues you.
Well, I mean,
I don't want to be sued. He already took all my money. All the money I would use to pay the lawyer is in this kid's pocket. This kid has managed to spend it all somehow on something.
do you feel like having been failed by law enforcement, do you feel like he sat in his reading chair between his two bookshelves in his
With
basement
his candy bar.
and with two guns, he, having already moved his truck out of the driveway and heard glass break and remained sitting there reading his book, apparently, until, do you feel like he was taking care of it himself, like judge, jury, and executioner?
I don't think the idea of laws, judge, jury, executioner came into his mind at all.
What do you think that the pause between, what do you think the motive for moving his truck was?
Okay, that's an excellent question, because the way that it reads in all of the court documents, it's like they think he was baiting them to come commit the felony in his house.
I don't see how that's even possible, but I understand what you're saying.
But that's how, so that's the premeditation. It's not just the sitting downstairs. The first element of premeditation is moving the vehicle. And as a defense-sided person, like me, that would be the first hill that I would look at and be like, well, boys, the whole platoon's going up that one, because I have no idea how you get past that. I look at it and I go, he moved his truck, and there is no humanly possible way he could have known they were going to break in.
There is no way, except he did somehow know.
Except somehow that guy was prescient enough. Exactly. He knew, and it happened.
Within like 30 minutes.
And that alone should tell you that the cops in this town blows. Because, like, how can you do that? How could he know that moving his truck will bring felonious teenagers into his house? That sounds like something that you would read out of like a movie where there's a sex offender trying to lure children. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Sort of, but I also feel like his truck could have just sat in the driveway and he could have just read his book.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. He said I didn't really buy I was going to clean out my garage, but I don't really think this guy knows how to lie, since he gave us a tape of him reloading the gun after it jammed.
That's like the worst thing ever. And so that's the other thing. Like, that would have almost been some sort of course, it was the second victim, but the gun jamming was almost like, hello, dude, stop.
The universe is telling you you're done. You've completed the task at hand.
Wait, he's got another gun on his hip.
Not only that, he says sorry about it and he reloads.
Yeah, he was being a real asshole.
I don't think he's being an asshole. I don't think the guy has just because somebody has a bad personality doesn't mean they're doing like something illegal. He is not doing anything illegal in my mind. According to Minnesota statutes, he didn't break the law.
So you feel like it was completely necessary for him. So what would a case be where somebody went too far?
Well, you mentioned early on when we started talking about this, you mentioned Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. I always felt like that case was a murder that was not justifiable.
Right, and
they're not in a home there, but like
well, that's where the stand your ground versus duty to retreat situation comes into play. And in Florida, you can stand your ground, and it doesn't have to just be in your home. I snapped. More than likely. Yeah,
it was, first of all, it's interesting to me how many Thanksgiving crimes you came up with.
There's a lot more than just us.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, all of these every one of these that you sent me had a very interesting angle to it. The big thing for this one, which we'll get into who it is in just a second, was there was a lot of video footage in this case. Did you know that?
Do you mean about like the court case or like?
So the first officers on the scene.
Oh, you mean like when the crime was like at the scene of the crime?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So. This is not one where somebody goes missing or gets murdered and then days later the police are investigating it. Basically, the footage in this was sort of like a horror movie. So the first officer on the scene is wearing like one of the older body cameras that's got like a really big lens in it and kind of covers, I don't know if you've ever seen those, but it's like a fisheye lens.
Yeah, I have.
So literally as he's approaching the house, this is what they use to sort of narrate the court appearance. As he's approaching the house, he's using a flashlight. So right there, it's a creeps than usual. But these people are literally, they have steam coming off of them.
Off their bodies?
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Now, I didn't go and look it up, and there wasn't a readily available link, but I believe that I read about a chilling video that was supposedly from, I believe, the wife, her phone, and it actually showed like part of the crime happening. And what like I said, I didn't, there wasn't a link to it and I didn't seek it out.
I think that's being misrepresented in some of the articles.
Okay. Well, like I said, I don't know why I don't mind listening to stuff, but I really wasn't interested in seeing it. Hopefully it's not out there, honestly.
The original article that we started with here is from meaww.com. It was a human interest article by...
I believe that's pronounced meow.
References to it.
No,
they call it... The references to it, they call it meow. So I was like, that's...
Yeah, I don't know. I was actually looking for a not Wikipedia source, which... you have to take all these sources for what they're worth, unless you're reading straight off of a court document, which is in like an actual, court document database.
Yeah.
You have to take it for what it's worth. We found in a lot of cases, details are added or subtracted, and it while it didn't seem to change, the piece, it actually changes a lot of the story.
It does. It changes the story overall. And when you're not reading the court documents, you don't 100% know what a jury was thinking, is my opinion. I mean, I don't think you necessarily know what the jury is thinking even when you're reading those, but you can at least see how it's presented and sort of where, if there were like wrong turns or like sort of hard turns towards innocence or guilt, you can usually see them in the court documents. This is an April 7th, 2020 article from Purna Nambiar, and it just says, "I will go out, I will leave. Wife and stepdaughter and boyfriend pleaded for their lives before ex-pastor killed them." So here's the text of the article that just sort of gives us a little bit of the overview of the case. A former pastor was indicted and then arrested for killing his wife, stepdaughter, and her boyfriend on Thanksgiving night. The court sentenced him to 100 years behind bars after it saw on a video recording which one of the victims, his stepdaughter's boyfriend, was heard pleading for his life. The accused is Christopher R. Gaddis, 59. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. It all started with Christopher and his wife, Jeanette, when they got into an argument over her daughter, Candace Coons, 30, and boyfriend Andrew Buthorn's prolonged stay at their house. Christopher was reportedly upset with his wife's children overstaying their welcome and made his intentions clear that he wanted them out of his house 2 days before the killing. At the trial, the court also saw a chilling video clip taken by Jeanette, which she recorded days before the killings. That part is, I think, where some of the sources for this reported that it was video of the killing. The video showed Christopher talking to his wife, her daughter Candace, and boyfriend Andrew. As reported by the Richmond Times-Dispatch, Candace's phone was recording at the time when, just before midnight, Christopher walked into their kitchen with a loaded pistol. The video saw Christopher shooting and killing Candace and captured Andrew crouched behind a table, pleading for him to have mercy. Okay, so that's the first place that I had like a problem with the sources on this, because there's 3 different sources for this that all say the same thing. It says a clip taken by Jeanette, which she recorded days before the killings, and then it says the video saw Christopher shooting and killing Candace and captured Andrew crouched behind a table, pleading for him to have mercy. So I don't know which one is accurate. I have not seen the video. I didn't seek it out, like you were saying. In the video, Andrew says, "I will go out, I will leave." Christopher shot his wife first, then his daughter, and lastly Andrew, who was trying to escape the house with the hope of saving himself. The court also heard that days before Christopher committed the murder, there had been a feud which was developing between him and the rest of the family. 2 days before the ill-fated day, the family fought over the same topic, while Jeanette, Andrew, and Candace were playing a board game. During this argument, the court documents state that Christopher, who had been drinking, shoved his wife and allegedly tried to punch her before his nephew, who was at the house for the holiday, interceded. The argument started because Christopher did not want his wife's daughter and boyfriend, who were physical therapists, to stay at his house any longer. He was reportedly okay with them staying a few days, but it had been weeks since Candace and Andrew moved into the house, and this disturbed him. The strange atmosphere around the house lasted for over 48 hours up until the day of the murder. In his last attempt to make Candace and Andrew understand, Christopher tried to talk them into leaving. At around 6 p.m., Christopher went to confront Candace and Andrew while the two relaxed in a hot tub in the backyard. The scene was captured on surveillance camera that are in the backyard. Shaking his finger, Christopher demands the couple leave, but his wife intervenes and records the confrontation with her cell phone. About 11 p.m. that day, Christopher went upstairs, retrieved his Taurus .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol, then walked into the kitchen where the family was playing a board game. Christopher killed all of them one by one and emptied his gun. The court also heard Christopher's nephew during the trial, who claimed that Jeanette had requested him to hide Christopher's gun as she feared he might do something with it. Meanwhile, the videos that were recorded by Jeanette were played in the court. Christopher initially claimed that he was threatened, saying they all came after me, and he shot them when they ganged up on him. However, the recordings proved otherwise. The court sentenced him to 100 years in prison for each of the 3 murder counts, with 45 years suspended on each. What is he doing?
I think he just snapped.
Yeah, he snapped.
But it was more like a prolonged bend to break, like because of the time that elapsed. This can get these types of situations can get complicated because so this was the wife's adult daughter, and it was not his daughter. So the wife, Jeanette, she and Christopher were married at some point. I don't even know when they got married, but her adult daughter, who's not his biological child, 30 years old, moved into their house with her boyfriend, and they were staying there. And that's what this stems from. There's no question in my mind that this could have been settled without killing anybody.
Well, yeah, it is so rare that homicides are like really justifiable. Like it is so rare for someone to be so threatened that they have to shoot and kill someone. And then it just gets rarer for them to have to kill 2 people. And in this instance, 3 people.
And he killed his wife, right? I mean, there's no mention that he wanted her to leave as well. I don't see why, unless they were just, do you think he felt like he was being like blatantly disrespected?
I mean, I think he felt like he was getting disrespected, but it wasn't, there was nothing about it for me personally that I went, okay, well, that's the moment. I try and get inside the head of these particular people, and the way that it's presented in the media, it's all just, former youth pastor kills family playing video game. Or board game, I think is what they were playing or something. But the way that I viewed it when I read it, it was almost like he felt like he didn't own his own home anymore. The truth is, it's his step family. So, some people don't do well when they have people sort of foisted upon them. I think he liked his life with Jeanette. He did not care for any of the rest of them. I thought it was a little weird that they were physical therapists, but living in his home. And I thought, that's a situation where if everybody's basically a professional of some kind, because this guy was a pastor at some point, so he was a professional. They're physical therapists, so they were essentially professionals. You would think they would have a conversation before everybody moved in, just about basic expectations. So they had been in the home for 6 weeks. They had come from Oregon, and this is Jeanette Gaddis's daughter. They called her Candy, by the way, and Andrew. So this is up in Chesterfield County in Virginia. So they've come from Oregon. They've moved all the way across the U.S. They've just moved over here and moved into her house. I don't know what kind of situation they were sort of getting away from in Oregon. But the idea was that they were supposed to be there for a week or so while they sorted out living arrangements.
And so that's what he probably agreed to.
Yeah. But instead, they've been here for, at the at the point that this happened, they moved in mid-October, and this is the end of November. It's really hard because of the way the plea deal went down. It's really hard to sort out what happened.
Right. There's not a whole lot of information, but it does mention that there were incidents just prior to the killings where, he was shoving his wife and going to punch her, but a family member intervened.
She had started recording this on her cell phone because it's not just one video on her cell phone; it's multiple videos.
Right, and I believe
collected.
it did lead up to the incident, and so it makes me wonder a couple of things. So I could see this being a situation where I don't know how long they were married, it could affect my opinion, but maybe he was abusive and she wanted her daughter there as a buffer. And that's kind of completely different from, what's sort of portrayed. And I'm not saying, well, he ended up killing them. So what does it matter if I say that he could have been abusive? But, if it was that type of thing, because I can't imagine this would have been outrageous at, a week or two, but 6 weeks in, there should have been some serious discussions about the future, right? What's happening. It sounds to me like rather than say, okay, we're going to be getting this apartment in, a couple of weeks, or we're closing on our house in a month or whatever. It sounds like he was just like, I don't care, get out, right? And, the mom wasn't having that because it's her child. Now it is her grown child. And there's just a lot of underlying circumstances there that, could affect things one way or the other.
So the timeline on this is all happening, when the murders happened is 2017.
Right.
So Christopher and Jeanette, they get married in 2009. Christopher Gaddis had moved to Chester, Virginia in 2008. In 2009, they end up married. And in 2014, he is working as a Grace Lutheran Church as their director of youth ministry. And he was a former pastor in all of the newspaper articles. I don't know if that is something where he lost that job or he sort of grew out of it and took a different job, or what was going on, because he's a little too young to retire. He's 58 years old when all this is going down. Candace had been a traveling physical therapist at something called AM in Healthcare, but she was also on a bunch of those, I don't know what you call them. Do you know what I mean when I say things like Arbonne and Mary Kay?
Yeah, they're multi-marketing schemes.
Multi-level marketing. So she...
organizations.
When, glancing at her Facebook page, she has a lot of information about those type scenarios where she's looking for extra money. It looks like she had a DPT, meaning a doctor of physical therapy, from something called Radford University that I'm not familiar with. But other than that, it looks like there's a lot of travel going on. And then Andrew comes into the picture, and he's included in the travel to some degree. I looked through his Facebook stuff. It wasn't super interesting. Just going through the social media around this, it seems like a lot of people had the impression that it was just all a great loving family. And Candy on her Facebook page even mentions that she loves her family and talks about she has pictures on there with some other relatives, and it includes photos of Jeanette, her mother, and it includes Christopher Gaddis. So they had been married. This is about 8 years that they had been married when this happens. Just in general, I really get confused when somebody who is of a very peaceful profession, in this instance, a youth pastor, ends up doing something that's very hard for me to comprehend. The way that this ends is we have Jeanette and Candace in the house, dead from gunshot wounds. Andrew, he managed to get outside of the house, and he basically is shot dead in the yard. And that's what brings the police to the scene so quickly. If you look through the 2008 18 articles from the Chesterfield Observer, which is a local newspaper there, and then the Richmond Times-Dispatch, which is another larger paper. They talk about the first officer on the scene the night of the triple homicide, and they talk about what I was referencing, like the more chilling video. I have not seen the video from her phone, but I have seen this particular video. There's not a lot of talking in it. The cop comes up on the scene, and this all is played out. If you look up the Christopher Gaddis suppression hearing, it is online where you can go look at it. It's a pretty grisly scene. They're really good about blurring out the bodies and stuff. But on direct examination, the assistant Commonwealth's attorney is a guy named Ken Chitty. He is talking to the officer on the scene, and that officer is N.C. Frazier. That's how they reference him in court. He testified that he was on patrol. He was about a mile from the Gaddis house when he received a call from dispatch to respond to a residence due to a security alarm being triggered. In the video footage, Frazier approaches the residence using a flashlight to guide himself in the dark. The camera footage shows Andrew with steam coming out of his body due to the cold, lying face up on the front lawn in a bloodstained T-shirt. He's unresponsive. He's got his mouth open, and Gaddis is sitting on the front steps. Frazier walks up to Gaddis. Gaddis tells Frazier that Andrew had threatened him. And then Frazier has Gaddis lie down on the ground with his hands behind his back, and he handcuffs him. After he's cuffed, camera footage shows Frazier trying to check on Andrew. He lifts up his T-shirt and reveals that there's gunshot wounds to his right side and that Andrew's unresponsive. When Frazier asked Gaddis why he shot 3 people, he says, they kept threatening me. They were threatening to kill me. So Frazier reads Gaddis's Miranda rights, including the right to remain silent. And Gaddis tells Frazier that there's 2 more people dead inside the house, 2 more people inside the house. And he says that they're probably all dead. They all came after me. According to the video footage, Frazier asked Gaddis if he'd been drinking, and Gaddis responds that he had only consumed 3 alcoholic beverages when they ganged up on him.
Yeah, I think maybe 1's his limit.
Yeah, so this describes a different weapon, but it is what it is. Frazier told the court that he entered the house and he discovered the weapon was a .40 caliber Glock pistol lying on a small table just inside the front door, about 6 feet from where Gaddis was sitting on the porch. Someone else described it as a .45 caliber Taurus. Doesn't really matter which gun did it. The bottom line is he killed his whole family. Crazy, right?
And it's sad. There's a lot of stress that comes with the holiday season, and I wish that it's almost like I can see so clearly how easily this could have been avoided if there.
Well, in your mind, how is this avoided?
Well, and see that the other part of this is it's 2-sided. So you've got the incident shortly before the murders that the nephew intervened, and he was able to stop the situation from continuing to escalate, right? So this would be avoided by whatever the underlying issue of, the kids being there and him not wanting them there. Because of their, like you said, they seem to be professionals, maybe they got new jobs and that's why they've moved back, or maybe they were in between, or maybe they were taking the holiday season off. But it almost seems to me like they were there as a buffer, and that might explain why he keeps saying that they were attacking him, because they weren't really attacking him, but he felt that they were. There can be when there's divorce of well-established adults, there can be some. I'm not saying they were going to get divorced. I'm just saying that it's possible that maybe they were trying to wait him out of the house. There can be implications if somebody leaves the house. And I'm just saying from a standpoint of why would they have continued on? Now, he also could have been the kind of guy who was, it does say that there's surveillance video of him confronting them in the hot tub. But like, what if he hadn't made it perfectly clear about how irritating it was to have them there, and they didn't understand the gravity of the situation? Because I doubt very seriously they thought it was headed this way, don't you?
Yeah.
Why would you stay in a situation like that? Like, if they thought that they were going to die from it, why would they stay there? Clearly this was not a good fit. And so if the mom wanted, to live with her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend, it seems very clear that she's going to need to make other arrangements because her husband is not interested in doing that. He should have never, he shouldn't kill them over it, but I can see where he wasn't getting anywhere, and that could be really frustrating. Now, this is not a great idea, but it is a better alternative than what happened. He could call the police and have them escorted off of his property. I would certainly recommend that above shooting someone.
Yeah.
Now, it wouldn't have bode well for his relationship with his wife, I imagine. And so, and then of course, there's always a debate that you end up having, but if they both own the house, they'll end up having to go to court to determine lots of stuff involved in that situation. But as an owner of a house, you can have law enforcement step in and say, I don't want these people on my property anymore. Get them out of here. And they would oblige, even over to avoid the confrontation, even over, another owner of the house saying they can stay, right? Because there's a conflict there. And what's the answer to that? Well, apparently shooting everybody is the answer to that. I have a feeling he regretted it as soon as he did it.
Yeah, I mean, if he was even sober enough, any time somebody says they've had 3 drinks, they've had more than 3 drinks.
Like 9,
yeah. I mean, that's just sort of how it rolls. But,
because otherwise you'd be like, I had 1 drink, right?
The one thing I had trouble shaking about this situation was, in looking at it, was the mom had been divorced for a number of years to the point that her ex-husband, and Candace's father had a long time stepmom in the picture. When I was looking through the different documents related to it, I realized something. I think, how, and there's a couple cases that pop in my head. This is going to sound so wrong when I first start saying it, but I think I'm coming around to an idea you'll understand. There are certain men who feel like they don't measure up to their wife. And I'm not saying that, I don't know. I looked for her occupation. I couldn't find it. But I was wondering if the mom wasn't the breadwinner because of how things went, where it looked like there's periods where Christopher is unemployed. And I was wondering if he felt like he was, 58 years old. He's no longer working in this job as the youth pastor or whatever. And
it says former pastor. It doesn't say like what he currently is doing.
Yeah. I was just wondering if like he was feeling trapped on a different level. And I'm not excusing his behavior. I just am always curious. There was this case where, it's weird when I start thinking about these cases where one partner is like really sort of not pulling their weight. And the one that pops into my head immediately, and I don't know if you'll remember it, it's not a Thanksgiving case. It's Mark Hacking, who killed Lori Hacking out in Utah. That was the guy who was lying about getting into med school and like all of these other things.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
It's a Utah case, but anyways, his wife goes missing. It's obviously he did it. Or like think about like the Powell murders, like Susan Powell was missing, and then he kills the whole family. with the explosion and the fire. When I think about cases like that, I wonder if they just like it really doesn't have anything to do with the other people.
Yeah, I would say that, except that they're not bending to their wishes.
They're not bending to the wishes of the person who ends up being the annihilator. Is that what you mean?
Correct. Like, so for example, let's say that Jeanette was the breadwinner of the family and the house he couldn't afford it, right? By himself is what I mean.
I know what you mean about the breadwinner situation where like even if he wins, he can't afford his own lifestyle anymore.
Right, without substantial assistance, which of course, like, just saying, like, killing her does not actually solve that.
No, it's not done. Okay, so it's not well thought out. And when I say it's not
at
well,
all.
like it's not like he planned, oh, I'm getting some life insurance or whatever. He just is at the end of his rope when he realizes that, like, you know, he dug himself a pit and now he's got to like lay in it and he doesn't want to lay in it.
Well, yeah, I have a feeling. So I saw where he had been previously charged with at least one public intoxication and
Drinking problem.
Right. Well, that's, I assume that has a lot to do with this whole case, I would think. But he also was charged with assault and battery in September of 2012, and it had to do with a newspaper man delivering a paper that he in turn threw back at the newspaper man.
Really?
Yeah, here's what it says. The alleged victim is Kevin Defford. Kevin is a newspaper delivery man who said he was delivering a paper called Richmond.com when Gaddis ran out in front of his car and threw one of the papers through his window and hit him on the head with it. Defford said his son then jumped out of the car to try and protect his dad, and that is when Gaddis pulled out a box cutter and flashed it at his son. He was out doing leaves that day, if I remember correctly, and just lost it is the best I can describe it. Defford describes Gaddis as being on edge and agitated and said Gaddis later explained to him why. He had gotten a test result that he and the family were concerned about, and they were waiting for the doctor to call back with another one, and that was his reason for being on edge.
I bet that's bullshit. I bet that's like Mark Hacking's. I got into med school and I'm really stressed because I have to do something.
Well, from my own experience, I have ran over newspapers that I didn't purchase with the lawnmower. Okay. That I didn't see them. They're in the grass, whatever. And then I've got to go clean up 50 million pieces of paper. Okay. So I could see myself throwing a newspaper back at a newspaper person, right? I'd like to think I wouldn't do that, but I could see, like, if he had just said that, I would totally believe it, but I don't understand. I feel like there's going to be like almost an emotional defect maybe in taking something like that out on a newspaper delivery man. Don't you think?
Yeah, probably. I read through a number of stories where people documented Gaddis's. Did you see the thing about the text messages? Like him sending like crazy text messages. There was a lot of stuff. He was basically, he wasn't all there anymore.
Right. And alcohol has a tendency to do that, especially when you have a problem.
Yeah.
And I would say that because alcohol or any substance really, like, it doesn't just affect you when you're drinking. Even if you're not drinking, there's consequences, I guess you could say, to having a problem drinking.
Yeah.
And those seem to kind of spill over here. And I think that some really good communication would have helped this a long way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I also feel like, it'd be a really weird thing. Let's see. How old was Jeanette?
She was the same age as him.
54, is that what you said?
59, I think. 58 and 59. They were like close in age.
They, by the way, they went to high school together.
Yeah, but he had been gone for a while.
No, yeah. I mean, she had went through an entire like marriage with kids and everything.
Right.
And so they hooked back up later in life, which that's interesting to me, because it has more of this guy wasn't a stranger, basically,
Right.
is what I'm saying. They did talk about how they were opposites, though. And so you're, 59 years old, and suddenly your daughter is, I assume this is the first time in their marriage that they had been faced with an adult child coming back to live with them. And so what do? You're not going to kick your kid out, but you don't necessarily want your husband to be unhappy, but he sort of needs to deal with it. But it's not his biological child, right?
Right, yeah.
And so, and it just creates this huge rift. He should have removed himself from the situation, but I don't know that somebody who's operating at that level where having house guests you don't want for a little longer than you don't want them is going to lead to shooting people. You know what I mean? I don't know that somebody that's going to do that is going to possibly be able to remove themselves from the situation. I would highly recommend, it would cause further strain and things that they would have to deal with, but he should have either had law enforcement remove them from the premises, or he should have gotten a hotel room. I mean, because that you could push back. I mean, yeah, he shouldn't have to leave his house.
I think a lot of this requires
really thoughtful thinking.
Yeah, that
doesn't come in the heat of the moment like that.
Yes. This is this is why a lot of places have, sort of cool down laws. It's not for your everyday Joe that's getting into a fight with his girlfriend or everyday Jane that's getting into a fight with her boyfriend. It's for the people who are in a situation where an officer trying to assess it for 10 minutes isn't going to be able to tell what's really going on. So they'll have these cool down laws where people can get a restraining order and it lasts for 48 hours and then a judge hears it. Or if there's been an allegation of assault, they go to jail with no bond and they have to hold them for the 48 hours. It's really for what you're describing there, so that whatever is in their system gets a chance to get out and they can have a thoughtful thought.
Right. And it seems like maybe his system wasn't getting a chance to.
No, and that's the impression I was left with, is that his liver and everything were working overtime trying to keep.
I mean, he was calmly
level.
sitting on the front porch waiting for the police.
Oh, I'm sure the minute he pulled the trigger, he got real sober real fast. He just was rampaging there for a minute.
He chased the boyfriend out of the house, though.
I know.
To shoot him, which that's so much more than just snapping, really. I mean,
it's something to keep in mind.
He was mad.
The holidays are upon us, so this is how I'm going to wrap this up with. No, I'm serious. It's Thanksgiving, Christmas is coming.
Agree.
People guys, just take a minute. Maybe have one less drink. Maybe take a break. If you're going to be around your family, maybe find something other than alcohol to help you through the day, like Benadryl. Benadryl is fantastic. You can sleep through any Christmas meal with Benadryl. I promise. It's better than. I'm sort of I'm making a little bit of a joke there, but the truth is, don't put yourself in situations that you can't thoughtfully think your way out of. Seriously.
Right. Well, and it doesn't seem like Christopher necessarily put himself in this situation. He just found himself there.
Yeah, this was just his. It's one of those. I think this guy woke up genuinely. I think he woke up one morning, and before his first drink, one of the last thoughts he had was, "Well, this is my life now. Yep, this is it. This is what I do." Right,
and he ultimately, while it's easy to blame everybody else, it really, your life is in your control. So I can see all kinds of things that probably would have been helpful if it had just happened. But, I can say that because I'm reading an article and looking back on something somebody else did that had absolutely no effect on me. And I'm aware of that. So, but yeah, holidays are stressful. Take some Benadryl.
Yeah, I was looking for him, and I was going to pull the court documents so that we could talk a little more about this case, but I realized that there were 3 murderers named Christopher Gaddis between 2010 and 2020.
No
And
way,
there was,
really?
yep, and there was another one in 2001. So, and they weren't all in the same area, but like one was North Carolina, one was Virginia, but there's several murderers named Christopher Gaddis that I was sort of thumbing through trying to get the court documents together to look at this case. But I realized that like some other people have covered this one, and since it's part of our larger sort of Thanksgiving special we're doing here, I didn't feel like we should dig a lot deeper into it. But I did want to ask you, like, is there anything else anything else crazy that stood out about it to you?
No, it's just very sad.
This was a case where I can genuinely say, looking at it all, I felt like, one, there was a lot of opportunities to stop this, not by the family themselves, like not by the people involved directly, because I don't think he could have done it, and I don't think the other 3 understood where it was headed.
I think
There was
they
a lot of
tolerated.
people around for the holidays.
I think they tolerated a whole lot more than a lot of people would have.
Yeah.
As far as
I
the
agree.
ridiculous of how they viewed what they reviewed as what they may have viewed as ridiculous. Like they weren't taking him seriously because of his position.
Well, like my final thought on people like that who are stuck in these situations and they're not quite ready to get out of them is I think it's one of 2 things. I think both of them are sort of wave of the hand situations. And the first wave of the hand is, oh, he's just like that. And they've just resigned.
Which is exactly what I could hear them saying.
And the other thing is, like, the other wave of the hand is, oh, he's hit a rough patch. So it's one of those 2 things. It's either that is his personality and we've just accepted it for what it's worth until we don't accept it anymore, or it's that they feel like circumstances in life have led him to whatever's happening here. And I'm specifically referencing how the family would look at Christopher Gaddis. And the other thing is they don't even have 10 years of history with this guy.
Right.
He was single till he was 48 or whatever, or wasn't married when he was 48 for a reason.
That's interesting. Was he previously married?
I didn't
have
see
children previously. Does he have any of his own children?
Because this wrapped up as a guilty plea the way that it did, there's not a lot of information about him out there. You can dig a little bit. For people that are really wanting to hear more about this case, I did notice that a podcast I used to listen to, Southern Fried True Crime, has like a 2019 episode about this case. I considered going and like seeing what her sources were and kind of digging back through it. But here we have been so deep in these Thanksgiving family killers. I didn't go any further because I'm hung up on the Byron one that we covered earlier. I didn't go any further with this case because I was like, man, we're just going to ruin Meg's favorite holiday. And I don't really want to do that.
It's not ruining it. I actually feel like this is like something to spread awareness about. I mean, because it could happen to literally anybody. And if you're paying attention, you have the opportunity for it to help it not happen.
Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by LabRottiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabRottiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time. This is True Crime XS.